So without further ado, I will pass you over to Cerys, who's going to talk about templates for ERNs. Okay, so Dr. Cerys Willoughby, I'm going to talk to you about templates, as everybody says. So I'm from the University of Southampton. I'm also part of the PSDI project. So what I'm going to be talking to you about, it's some research I did quite a while ago. So my background before I got involved in the university and ELNs was looking at usability. So the question I had for myself was, how do researchers behave and how do different interfaces potentially affect what information they record? So templates provide a structured environment for recording information, but is this good and bad? You'll kind of gather from the talk that it's not all good, but particularly looking at how does it affect the quality of the information that people capture. Okay, so let's look at the good part first. So there are some advantages of templates. So particularly when we're moving from paper to digital, they can help people to know what it is they should write down. So quite a lot of people struggle to know the blank page, what to do, so blank canvas effect. It can also encourage consistency. So if lots of different people use the same template, chances are what they record is going to be quite similar to each other. This can be very useful, especially in a lab or a group. Can be very efficient. So if you're doing the same kind of experiment over and over again, you're repeating it or very similar experiments, you can take your template and you can tweak it, or you can use the same one again to get the same results. And they're also adaptable. They can be configured. You can choose a template that matches your kind of science or your particular kind of experiment. So these are the good things. But could there be unexpected effects? How might templates, how might digital affect what people are recording? How do we go about finding that out? So looked into a bit of kind of background, thinking about what makes people record what they record. How do they think? So a lot of it relates to kind of psychology and expertise, knowledge that we have in our memory. And what we write down is to do with what we know, but also the conditions on which we do that. So if I have a blank piece of paper, what I write down, what I'm going to record is dependent upon what's in my mind at the time, what I'm thinking about, and also what I've been taught. So if you've had any training on how you might structure a lab notebook, for example, that's going to influence what you record. So there are other things that can influence that. So for example, using cues, using prompts, we're going to jog people's memory, encourage them to think about that particular thing and therefore write that particular thing down. There's also, we can think about changing perspective people that have, making them think about information from a different way, and that will change what they think about. So example, if I ask you to write down a description of a house from the perspective of a home buyer, we're going to think about, well, how many bedrooms has it got? How many bathrooms? Does it have a nice kitchen? Has it got a garage? What's the garden like? But if I ask you to write a description of a house down from the perspective of the burglar, it's going to be very different. We're thinking about, is there a burglar? Why is the fence? Is it nicely lit or not? What kinds of windows are there? How might I break the lock on that? Very different perspective. So changing how you think about it will change what you do. So did a few studies. What happens if we make some changes and how does that influence what they do? So the first one, experimenting on some chemistry undergraduates. Very, very simple, really the simplest sort of change. So a blank piece of paper and then titles template. So these are the kinds of things that we want them to record. So this, in fact, is exactly what they were asked to record in their paper notebook. So they had a guide of what they should be recording in their paper notebook. So the expectation is that blank piece of paper and the template should be very similar to each other because they should be used to recording this information. But we might get a bit more because we're adding a reminder by using these prompts, these cues. So to some extent, we did get what we expected. So blank piece of paper was very focused on procedure. So it was about what I did, the things I did, what I saw, why I did those things. This is good. This is what we expect people to write down. Template. So we got more things. So we got things like the reaction scheme, the ERNs, and we got more information about learning the theory. So how did it relate to what they'd been taught? Why were they doing the experiment? But what we started to lose was the observations that they made and the explanations as to why they did things. We started to lose the personal experience. And the procedure in particular, there was actually, for the majority of people that took part, was a switch. So instead of saying, I did this, it became do this. It was step by step, do this. As though it then completely separated them. We lost all that personal experience. So there's more data, there was more captured in the title template, so they got higher scores for it, but we lost all of that personal stuff. So this was a bit concerning. So we thought, well, what can we do to try and bring that back again? So the next study, we introduced a new template, which was profile template. So this was actually asking questions, and those questions included, what did you do? What did you see? Did anything unexpected happen? Try and capture some of those personal elements of the experiment. So they did those experiments, used those different templates. What we saw were, for the blank piece of paper and the titles, very similar kind of results. So blank piece of paper, what I did, my observations, my explanations to why things happened. Title templates, we got what we asked for, except for the fact that the procedure was not, really what I did. Using the profile and questions, so we got lots more information. We got lots more about learning that theory. We did get the observations, but the procedure was shrunk even more this time, such that it was just a list of techniques rather than even steps. So somebody else could know a lot about what happened in the experiment, but they wouldn't know how to duplicate and repeat that experiment themselves. So that was very interesting. Also, again, with the questions, much more information, they scored higher marks for it. So this is good, but still some problems. So final study, so this was a different kind of experiment. So the previous ones have been synthesis experiments. So this was using Lego rocket cars. So they had to do experiments where they created little cars, powered them without seltzer, measured how far they went. So this was really fun, and did this study with some very serious Swedish people. So this was doctoral students, postdocs, and faculty members. We divided them into groups and got them to use different templates. So same templates as before, a couple of little additions. So one of them was a plan. So an observation we had was that quite often people are writing the procedure before they go into the lab, and then not actually writing what changed, what was different. So we're trying to capture the, what did we do, what didn't. And then there was one more, what I thought was a really helpful addition, a table. So in the titles template, so we've got these nice titles, nice headings. I thought, so we have this repeated experiment, there's lots of variables, it would be really good to make life easier for them, give them a table. I was genuinely trying to be nice to them. This was a complete and utter disaster, because the people in those groups, they spent all of their time filling in this table, and I mean all of it. They didn't fill in any of the rest of the template, and they didn't fill in, they didn't actually do the experiment either, because they were too busy making cars, measuring them, right? Bit of a disaster. So these were more experienced researchers, faculty members. With the blank template, quite a lot of them actually kind of self-structured. So now, whether this was because it was a repeating experiment, it made it easier, they did that, or whether they were just more experienced and you kind of knew what to capture. So the quality of what they did there was better. But again, the profile templates are asking questions really did generate a lot more information. So it was a little bit laborious for them, but it generated a lot more useful information. And the plan, we did get there what they did before and what was different. So why is this a problem? Or why should we worry about it? So for students, if they're not capturing what they did, why they did it, what they saw, what went wrong, what differences, so, an explanation for why they did this instead of that, then they're not learning. If they go back to reference it later on, that information isn't there. And it's not there if you're sharing the method. As I said before, it's not just about data, it's about understanding the procedure, what did you do, but there's also why did you do it? How does it relate to the science? What might go wrong? How might you fix those problems? So there's a lot more we need to capture than just a step-by-step procedure, or just worry about the data in the table is not sufficient for someone to repeat or validate the experiment. So there are some other things that we know about research behaviour. So this is why I have my prop. So take the notebook, it's my journal. it's my diary of what I do, it's my experiment, but it's also mine. I don't want to share it with anybody else. What I write in here is mine, and if I want to write something up to share, I want to write it up formally. And we see this behaviour with ELNs. So there's people who don't necessarily know what to put in the ELN, in a digital form or an ERN. But quite often what we're seeing, as Sammy mentioned, is that they're writing it somewhere else. So they're writing scrappy notes somewhere else, and they're writing it up formally into the ERN. Again, that causes the same problem, that all of the information is not there. The personal experience, what happened, is not captured. And we also know that they prefer, a lot of people prefer to use a pen and stylus because it's familiar to get the content into there. So if they have to use a keyboard, they're even more restricted, even less gets in there. If a template doesn't have space to record something, it doesn't get recorded. So there's been problems in healthcare, so particularly the move from paper notes to digital notes in hospitals and GP offices, that if the system that they're putting data into doesn't have space for important information, that information is not captured, and that has very significant impacts for patient health. There's something really important and it doesn't exist on the system. And the same thing goes for ERNs. If there's a template and there's not there, it causes frustration. There's nowhere to put it. It gets lost. So what can we do about it? So a variety of potential things. So having a blank section that isn't prompted so that people can capture whatever it is they want to capture. If there's not somewhere to put information, it's frustrating. Give them somewhere to put it. This is particularly useful if it's capturing procedure. What did I do in the lab? What happened? It's important with templates to be very cautious about what words you use to describe the sections or the guidance that you give. So it's a good idea to test those templates out. Are you capturing what you expect to catch? Are your students doing it? Are the researchers capturing it? Precise wording matters, so very subtle differences can have a big effect on actually what people do report. You can make, so digital format, you can say, I want this to be a mandatory field, you must fill it in. Now that's good because it will encourage people to fill in that form. But there are some things to watch out for. So one of which is it can be frustrating if there isn't anything sensible to put in there. So that can frustrate people and make them less inclined to want to use the system. But also people are lazy, and if you mandate something and they don't really want to fill it in or they don't see why they should, then they will do the minimum amount required. So you'll start to get, dots or one letter or something like that, and just they won't fill in the rest of it. So that can be a different problem. It's a good idea to start off with consistent templates or kind of standard templates, but allow people to, as they develop, as they understand what it is that they need to record, to be able to make them adaptable so you can change them. It's a good idea to think about training. So there's sort of observation that students in particular are recording things in rough notes and then formally writing them up, and they wrote this amount and then suddenly there's that amount. Make sure that people understand what it is that they should be recording, why they should be recording, why it's important to capture all these things. The personal experience isn't the sort of private diary thing. It's everybody needs to have access to that. It's useful. It's useful for them in their own career. It's 6 months' time to remember what they did. It's useful for other people later on to reference it. And it's also useful if there's a way for your ERNs to have stylus input so that people can write in a natural manner and they can draw pictures and so on. It's a good idea to try and find ways to do that if you can. So like tablets can be quite useful for that. Okay, so just before I shut up, a couple of plugs for some things. So on the left there is the PSDI knowledge base. So there's some guidance on ELNs, ERNs in there. It's first stages. We're expecting to expand it over time and evolve it. We want contributions as well. So if you have ideas about what you'd like to see in here, or you have case studies that you'd like to share with the community, please have that. Also plug for my book, Recording Science in the Digital Era. So this is, it's published by the Royal Society of Chemistry, but it is aimed at like anybody. And it's got more about this kind of thing, but it's also got some good guidance on how you, well, like I said, it's guidance on like choosing ERNs and implementing them, deploying them, and so forth. Thank you very much.